Hey everyone, welcome to the Horror Show. I'm Cecil Laird.
I'm Marcia Parker.
I'm Fuego here.
Finally here to do our review of the first season of The Haunting of Hill House.
Yay!
Marcia and I did the first couple episodes before.
I was lagging behind.
Marcia had already seen it all, and she was biting her tongue the entire review. But we are here now to talk about the whole thing. Let's avoid heavy spoilers, but minor things here and there are okay, but not the heavy spoilers. But I will say that I'm going to start off and say that I know a lot of people really, really, really love this series, and I definitely dug it. I think it was an elevation of horror, in the sense of, filmmaking being literally brought, like the TV show was of filmmaking standards for sure. It was a successful 10-episode horror film, but I had some pacing issues myself. I had a couple of other issues. So while I really liked it, I didn't love it as much as everyone else did. I'm a big Mike Flanagan fan, but this was while very good, and I do acknowledge that there is a ton of skill and writing and everything that had to go into this to pull off what they did. I just wasn't, over the moon about it like so many people have been. Marcia, what about you?
I think it's the best thing I've seen this horror season, for sure. It is. I'm sorry, but everything that I've watched, and maybe you guys have seen a little bit more than I have. Did you want to start over?
No, I'll just use that audio for now. Sorry about the bad audio for the beginning there, guys.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot this season, but when I'm looking at all of the television shows, because that's what I have been able to keep up with, not as much as with the new movies coming out, but like when you're looking at Walking Dead, American Horror Story, Light as a Feather, Sabrina, all that stuff that's coming out, none of them can touch this series. This series just blew my mind. I have not been as involved into a series since Stranger Things, because it wasn't just the acting or the story that got me in. It was also, like you said, the filmmaking and the way they filmed everything. The cinematography was a character in itself, because it was telling its own story and revealing things when it wanted to reveal things, which was what we want from camera work. So it was really, really exciting. I loved it. It was a little bit of Game of Thronesy, with every episode was somebody else's point of view, and you were told a little bit more. And I do want to rewatch it after watching the whole thing. I haven't had a time because there's just so much coming out right now. But I do want to go back and watch everything again, knowing what I know, because then I can look for those Easter eggs that are there in each episode, but you don't know to look for them until you get so far into the series. So I loved it.
Fuego.
I loved it too. There's a lot of hype behind it, and it's really tough to deal with that expectation kind of thing going into this. But my expectations were for something different than what I actually got. I was expecting something more akin to the original Haunting in the novel and stuff about paranormal investigation and stuff. I knew that there was a family aspect, but I didn't know they were going to focus as heavily on the dramatic family aspect as they did, and that's why I found this so compelling. I really think this was more drama than horror at the end of the day, and that's why I enjoyed it so very much, because I invested in this family, these characters, whether it was their adult or their childhood counterparts. I thought the acting on both ends was tremendous. I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, but it's a masterwork. It might be my favorite horror thing I've watched this year, honestly. I thought it was beautifully filmed. Episode 6, the tracking shots, we'll get to that at some point when we talk about the technical things, but just, and this show made me cry. Oh, yeah. This show made me cry, dude. And Marcia, holy crap. It got me emotionally to a core that I was not anticipating. Episodes 5 and episode 10 in particular. And yeah, it wasn't what I expected. And that's where, going in with the expectations that I did, it didn't really mess with me, because it ended up being something drastically different than I was expecting it to be. So
yeah, it's interesting. The story is about a family. As we've mentioned, it's a family of 7. There's a mother and a father and 5 kids, and they, half of the story takes place when they're all living in Hill House, and half of the story takes place, very It-like actually, when they're all adults, having all dealt with the trauma of living in Hill House.
And Mike Flanagan
in very different ways.
Stephen King fan, so I wonder.
But so it's 10 episodes, and the way it worked was the first 5 episodes each focused on one of the different kids. 6 and 7 brought all the characters together, and then 8 was the father, and 9 was the mother, and then 10 was once again bringing everyone together to wrap it all up. And it was really an ingenious way to frame a 10-episode series. And they did it so, you know, masterfully, straight up. Like, the amount of writing and the things that would tie together, because there's things from every episode that tie into later episodes, and you really have to pay attention. And as Marcia said, every episode, because it focused on a different character, I likened it more to Lost. Because, you know, there were the Lost episodes where it was a different character focus, and it would do flashbacks, right? So it would focus on the now and focus on the previous to the island. This is the same thing. So it jumps back and forth each of the episodes between what the character is doing and going through now and how their particular experience back in Hill House relates to that.
Yeah.
Again, brilliant writing. Every single episode, brilliant writing.
And there was corresponding shots where it would go from one incident and almost like the same like framing of the shot and actions of the character, and then just jump directly to something similar transpiring in the here and now. And yeah, I could see that being a jarring thing for some people, all of the time jumps and stuff like that, and some of the edits. But I just thought it showed the ambition of the process of just piecing all of this together and making those correlations. And yeah, it just elevated the entire process for me personally.
Yeah, you had to match everything too, like with the children actors, with the adult actors. They had a match, and they had to be similar, and especially because the episodes were so intricate and everything is like a big spider web and everything's connected. You have to make sure you've got to have a good person on there making sure everything is like spot on, because if anything is out of the ordinary or doesn't match, it's gonna make the whole thing crumble. And I think they did a really good job putting all of that together.
Now, as far as the story goes, you know, we went through it, and I mean that's as much as I want to say, really. I mean, every character has their own story per se, like, and then there is the overarching story of the family,
which is Hill House.
Yeah. So I mean plainly put, the whole family is the kids specifically, and even more specifically, a few of the kids more so than the others, are all dealing with weird instances and weird happenings going on inside Hill House. Some that might be considered paranormal, some that might not be, but some might be more mentally driven in some cases. But they, you know, that's what they're all dealing with, and the actions that happen as a result of some of these experiences are, you know, is the trauma that I referred to that everyone is sort of dealing with now in the future, as well as one of the kids has grown up to write a book about the house. One of the kids has grown up to be a child psychologist. One of the kids has grown up to just sort of
run a mortuary.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
So, and that's an interesting dichotomy, though, is that a few of the kids are very successful, and then 2 in particular that have a connection, without spoiling anything, are not successful and seem to have been riddled with just the lingering effects. That's what I honestly took out of it.
I wouldn't say they were both unsuccessful.
Well, they're both the most scarred, I
they're
would
the
say.
most
And they were the ones who had the
from
most
it.
interaction with the creepy shit at the house. So
I think you're led to believe one of them's more like loosey-goosey.
This is where I wish we could spoil.
Yeah, you're led to believe that one of them doesn't have it all together, and it turns out they did. They just had a lot more going on.
Yeah, some are more
that was a
flawed
good
than
twist,
others.
actually. I really liked that when they explained that.
Yeah, but
the guy with the drink and.
Yeah. The other thing I like about this story, not just about the main family, but everybody that's connected to either the family or to the house, they all had interesting stories. And even though they didn't elaborate too much on every character, they left it open to where I can see the next season can open it up to talk about those stories and bring it into different avenues, and I think that's pretty cool too.
I don't think they'll touch on these characters ever again.
And you don't think so?
Mike Flanagan
with the ones with the house?
Mike Flanagan has gone on record to say this is the Crane story and the Crane story is done, and he said there are no current plans for another season of this show, but then again they said the same thing about Stranger Things, and look what ended up happening.
Yeah, but this is a different situation. Stranger Things, you could continue with those characters. This one,
I felt like it wrapped it all up. Yeah, it wrapped it all up in a nice little package.
No, they could do a prequel, though. I feel like
they could if they had to.
Yeah, or other people coming to
But
the
why not
house
just let him go on and do something else just as cool and unique?
Well,
he has Dr. Sleep is his next project.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, like you don't want a guy like Flanagan to be chained down to do the Haunting of Hill House every year.
And it doesn't have to be him. I mean, just like any other shows.
He was the creator, wrote most of the episodes,
and he directed every episode.
Yeah.
That was pretty his baby.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, any other thoughts on the story before we move into the acting specifically?
There was a lot of really interesting beats, especially with the exploration of mental illness, without really going into too much detail. I did see some parallels with the Sissy Spacek character from Castle Rock, honestly, and just the disorientation of it, life seeming like a dream at times when it's really not. Those themes were explored heartbreakingly in this, in my opinion, especially in episode 9. Yeah, there's a lot of points in this story where you're like, is this really happening or is it not? And I always like stories like that because they keep you on your toes, they keep you guessing. The way they started episode 10 with him sitting and writing and everything, and you're like, are they going to do this to us? And then we won't go into details, but
they did a great job all the way around. I don't think there was really any aspect of the story that really like took me out of the show. And I don't know, it was so intricate. I guess I keep saying the same thing. It's just so intricately done, and they touch so many different aspects because each kid and each person, actually, you can say each person had different, views of what happened to them, and they all handled it differently in different experiences. So it touched on mental illness, it touched on drugs, it touched on, like not being able to deal, like closing themselves off from the world, or PTSD, or being too controlling. Like every way you can handle almost every way. I don't want to say every way, but any, like 7 different ways of how you can handle a traumatic event.
Yeah,
they covered it,
which denial, all these different things,
which was really interesting. You tackled a lot.
Now, before we move on to the acting specifically, if you had to pick your favorite story, aka maybe favorite episode of the series,
favorite
what do you think
episode?
It would be? Well, that would tie into the favorite story, I would think.
Oh, see, my favorite episode was 6, but my favorite.
Okay, that's fair.
That's
a fair call.
My
6
favorite
was the best shot episode.
Yeah, my favorite character was the child psychiatrist one. I forget her name. It's been too long.
Theo.
Yeah.
Theodora, who was actually...
I love Theo.
I was like, oh, she's lesbian? What were they doing here? And then I remembered, oh yeah, in the original Haunting, she was a lesbian.
Stop drawing comparisons.
No, they used a lot of the same names for all the people and stuff.
But yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, I like...
You viewed it as its own thing?
Again, I felt like... Well, yeah, I definitely did.
Yeah,
I didn't
totally
make any comparisons at all. I thought that the filmmaking was at its peak in episode 6, for sure, like Marcia said. I actually think episode 5 was my favorite.
5 was probably my favorite, too. That was the most emotional for me, honestly. I mean...
Yeah, that hit me the hardest.
Where she gets to the house,
it was the most... Like, you could almost do every episode as its own horror movie. 6 and 7 would kind of have to be lumped together. But 5 was the most horror-esque, like, that the series got, in my opinion. But also, like, did some storytelling things that I love. So I liked it a lot.
I thought 5 took the horror aspect out of the show because I thought so because when they revealed Nell's story, it was... To me, it wasn't.
I mean, 6 didn't really have any horror. 6 was just all about dealing with grief. And
that's why I say 6 and 7 kind of have
to
go
that's not
together.
True. There is supernatural aspects in 6 and 7.
A little bit. Just they were sprinkled around, though. I mean, more so at the end of the episode than anything, I thought. I mean, it was really just the interaction of the family and them just tracking them as they're going around getting their drinks and everybody's arriving and then follow this person. And then I guess there was the storm. If I was going to... Since you took 5, I might honestly say 9 because of the fact that 9 was, I think, the only episode that took entirely place in the 90s, and with all of them when they were younger and stuff, and it follows the mother in very, very heartbreaking fashion at times, without spoiling anything, and just they imply that she's, you know, she gets headaches and there's an essence of instability, but you never really doubt her love for these children. And Carla Gugino, who was also in Gerald's Game with Flanagan, she's tremendous in this. She's beautiful still, great looking lady, but she brought a warmth and an interesting gravitas to this. But as she's it's her experiencing the powers of the house and the presence that lingers there in that episode, and I found it very chilling, especially with a certain revelation about the imaginary friend. That scene made me go, what? Yeah, I seriously was sitting in my office rewatching it for the second time last night, and I was like, what? I forgot about that part. Okay. Yeah, all right. So, yeah, I thought she carried that episode very well, and so that would be my second beyond 5. 5 just made me cry the most. The end of that episode, my face was wet like a little wimpy wimp, so...
That was a good one.
I didn't cry
at all.
I don't think I did. I don't think I did at all. But I really liked that episode a lot.
It touched me. I felt warm.
So let's get back to the filmmaking of it. You touched on it briefly earlier, Marcia. Flanagan is a fantastic filmmaker, and yeah, the cinematography in this film was amazing, or film in this series was amazing. Fuego also alluded to something about episode 6. Episode 6 was comprised entirely of 5 shots. I think it was 5 or 6, but that's it for an entire 53-minute episode. And at the time when it dropped, Flanagan actually put out the time codes as to when how long the shots last and everything. But he said it was such a bear of an episode to film.
I can imagine
the timing of everything had to be perfect, and he's like, the actors weren't a problem at all, but getting everything timed right was the big issue.
It was so impressive technically, dude.
It really
just
was.
Watching that, I was like, this guy is a visionary, when it comes to filmmaking.
There was I think it was the first shot, because I think it goes all the way up until the dad comes in, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was the second shot. I can't remember, but there was a specific moment when they did a scan of the room. It was when the dad arrives. They did a scan of the room, and you see them as children, and they come back around, and it was the adults, and they didn't cut. So they had it made me stop and go, whoa.
He talked about how the kids were waiting off camera, and they ran in and then ran out.
Yeah, that's just
awesome.
amazing. Just thinking about them just waiting, because they had to do that quick switch and then a quick switch back, and not lose that beat. They all had the same look in their face. It was just insane.
All the childhood counterparts were, the casting was great in this movie. It really was. And I always champion getting great performances out of young kids, and I thought all of the child actors
they had
were
the
great.
same facial expression. You could tell that who was who, because they used the same facial expressions from when they were children to when they're adult actors, and I thought that was crazy how they were able to match that up and match each other.
I thought the girls especially were spot on with mannerisms, with speech patterns and things like that. The guys were both pretty good, but the girls, the women wowed me a lot in this show. They really did.
Well, I think with Luke being so young when they were at the house, he had a little bit more leeway, because it's a little bit harder to match your 6-year-old self. But even Nell matched herself pretty well too, but there's still that difference. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I thought the adult actor Steve was good. The young actor Steve didn't have as much to work with, but
no, he wasn't as pivotal. So we touched on I don't know, is there more acting we want to touch on? I mean,
the dad.
Yeah, the dad was great.
The dad was amazing. I mean, I have seen him in so many things at this point, and he just such
the younger
a great
dad or
job.
the older dad?
Yeah, it was different actors.
The older dad.
Yeah.
The younger dad did a good job too. I've seen like him in American Crime and a few other things.
He was in The Dark Half.
Yeah. And he's just so phenomenal, and I think he was probably one of the top billing cast members on this.
The story, you're talking about the older father, right?
Yeah.
The story that he tells about Nell during one scene.
The letter.
Yeah, again, without spoiling anything, he tells an amazing story about one of his kids, and it's so good, so good, and so endearing, and so well delivered.
Yeah.
The acting's sensational.
And what really connected me with him, though, it reminded me a lot of like the relationship I had with my own father. Whereas, you know, something happened and you missed so many years, but then coming back and trying to build that bridge again, but understanding what he did wasn't necessarily the right thing that he did. So he's trying to allow them to grieve and allow them to have that anger and let it out so they could build that bridge. And I thought they did that so well because every relationship he had with each kid is different. Mm-hmm. And they really did a good job of showing those different relationships and showing how they dealt with that issue. I mean, they all had something with issue with him, but also had a different type of forgiveness too, which was really interesting to watch. I like that part.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the effects then. I thought the effects were all fantastic.
The ghosts.
Yeah, the ghosts were done very well.
And the floating guy.
Oh, yes.
Oh, the floating guy was amazing.
Yeah.
Dude.
So creepy. And
he reminded me of both the Crooked Man and the Hush villains from Buffy. Because they glided around as well. But yeah, all of that was done so well and so effectively. The way that guy was just gliding across everything, and they'd show the feet and everything, and I'm sure it's an old school filmmaking technique, and you know, either a cart or wires, whatever they went with. Probably a cart would be the easiest, but
the way they filmed it.
Yeah, and just filming it at 2 different times, but it's still so effective. At one point they show it, you know, full body and everything, and that's really well done still. So
yeah, that was crazy actually.
Everything was so effective, and especially the effect of the reveal of episode 5, when you know, when something keeps dropping over and over again. So good. So good.
Yeah, and you got to give credit to the set design too. The exteriors were filmed in Georgia, and then the interior was done, you know, on a soundstage and stuff. But they just constructing this place from the spiral stairs to, I mean, it was massive. Like the house felt as big as it looks from the outside, and it just so impressively done. And all of the individualized rooms and everything. I mean, you definitely felt like you were somewhere seriously spooky, but just dauntingly huge, which makes it even scarier that a presence could be pervading this entire place, and who knows where it's, you know, just centralized at any particular time and stuff. And so, yeah, I was in awe with the set design. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, the set design is a good prop set design. All of that stuff was amazing. It really made the place feel like something to be scared of, as well as something a massive family would live in. You know, all of it was just done so well, and then all of the sets in the future as well were you know, done very well too. So
well, and also like where she's doing the autopsy and doing some of the cutting and everything, like that was giving me 6 Feet Under vibes, which I got a little bit here on this show, at least, you know, with the adult aspect of Sherry and whatnot, and her husband. But man, technically, this I can't help not coming back to, you know, episode 6, and those tracking shots, man, just wowed the hell out of me. I just sat there in awe of just how they assembled that. I don't think it was the most emotionally resonating episode, but at least as far as from that standpoint of just mapping everything out, I can't even imagine how painstaking that process must have been.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, guys. Any final thoughts on it? I think everyone knows at this point how awesome it is, but still good that we chimed in on it.
Yeah, I think it's becoming the popular thing to hate on this show, and I could also see how it's not for everybody. It's a slow burn. It's more on the dramatic side than the scarific side. There's really only one jump scare in a car that I can really think of made me actually like jump and
I don't know. There was like
deliberately to do it, you know, and actually executed very effectively, but this just really, it relies more so on ambiance and on interpersonal, just, I don't know, interactions and traumas and things like that. And, you know, dealing with grief is, as we said, a big component of this. And so, yeah, I loved it.
I think, well, I have to disagree. I don't know, maybe because it hit me so emotionally in different ways. And it, like, and just the house itself was scary, and I'm huge in the paranormal and supernatural, and like this is my big giant ghost story that doesn't have a crazy Scooby-Doo ending where it's not real. So I thought it had everything it needed to be a successful ghost story. And I remember after episode 9 having to shut it off, knowing there was only one episode left. Episode 9, I shut it down and I said I called Pete to come to bed with me because I couldn't handle it. I was
that episode ended
terrified.
pretty nuts.
It was just so terrifying to me. Just the whole thing was, and for many ways, yeah, it was not even just the tea party, just like her spiraling. Well, everyone pretty much spiraling into madness, but there's one character in particular that was spiraling into madness, and just how the house gobbled her up, and just like the idea of these, of a house kind of like similar to Murder House, where it's like, like it's feeding off of you, and it's feeding off of your family, and you just got to get your way out, and it just really affected me because I love that stuff. So I thought it was really successful, and I guess I've never heard anybody say anything bad about it, but maybe I'm just not listening to them because I thought it was very successful. So watch it if you haven't.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's going to do it. Let us know in the comments down below. What did you think of The Haunting of Hill House, or have you not seen it yet? I'd be curious to know you guys' opinion. While you're down there, click the link in the description box for our Patreon. You can become a patron and support the channel directly, and we greatly appreciate it if you do. Until next time, I've been Cecil Laird.
I'm Archberger.
Gracias, I'm Jaime Fuego.
And remember,
Stay
stay scared.